Vivid verses.
The city of Brennan Falls had a particular smell in October. Wood smoke threading through cold air, the faint mineral bite of the river that ran behind the commercial district, coffee from the dozen independent cafes that lined Cortlandt Avenue. I'd lived here for 6 years and had learned to read the city the way you learn to read a person. Its moods, its quiet tells, its occasional dishonesty. My name is Reed Calloway. I'm 34 years old. I design structural systems for mid-rise buildings. The invisible architecture that keeps walls standing and floors from folding. Most people, when they hear structural engineer, nod politely and change the subject. That's fine. The work doesn't need their appreciation to matter. Every morning I walked into the offices of Calloway and Lorne. Yes, my father's firm, which I joined 6 years ago as a junior associate and now ran as a full partner. And I did the kind of work that won't make anyone famous but will outlast everyone involved. I was seeing a woman named Petra Voss. We'd met 14 months ago at a birthday dinner for our mutual friend Cassidy Huang, held at a small Italian place on Brecker Street called Osteria Finn. Petra was tall, dark-haired, with a specific kind of social grace that read as warmth until you spent enough time with her to understand it was more like performance. Polished, consistent, but not spontaneous. I was attracted to her anyway. I'm not immune to surfaces. In the first 4 months, things are good. Uncomplicated. She was a marketing director at a mid-sized cosmetics brand called Loon & Company, which she spoke about with the kind of proprietary pride that suggested she considered herself indispensable to it. I admired the drive, if not always the self-mythology surrounding it. We ate well, traveled twice, once to the coast of Verano Bay, once north to the Olcott Valley wine region, and found an easy rhythm of weekend mornings and weeknight dinners. Then something shifted. I can date it fairly precisely. Around the 6-month mark, she began to make comparisons. Small ones, at first almost incidental. A colleague of hers named Bryce had just bought a property in the Fenwick Hill neighborhood. A guy she'd grown up with had made partner at his private equity firm at 31. A friend's boyfriend had surprised her with a trip to the Maldives. I registered these observations without reacting to them. That's not suppression. It's just my natural operating mode. I don't perform emotions I'm not having, and I wasn't threatened by Bryce or the private equity guy or the Maldives trip. I was doing well. I owned a clean 2-bedroom apartment in the Ashford district, drove a practical car I liked, and had built enough of a professional reputation that work came to me more than I chased it. I wasn't wealthy in any conspicuous sense. I was stable and skilled and unhurried. But Petra, I was beginning to understand, did not experience stability as a virtue. She experienced it as a plateau. And in her taxonomy, a plateau was the first stage of stagnation. By month 9, the comparisons had structure. She developed a rhetorical habit, the compliment with an asterisk. You're so capable, Reed. I just wonder sometimes if you're playing it too safe. Or, you're smart enough to be doing something bigger. The asterisk always gestured toward the same absence. Money, ambition expressed as scale, a lifestyle of accumulation. I listened to these observations with the same attention I'd give to any data set, and the data was becoming clear. One evening in late August, we were at our friend Mauro Tate's dinner party. 8 people in a narrow apartment in the Halverson district, decent wine, better food. Petra's colleague from Loon & Company, a man named Prescott, was talking about a commission he'd just received on a brand campaign, a number large enough to produce a quiet ripple of impressed silence around the table. I watched Petra's face in that moment. It was the face she made watching something she wanted moved past her. On the walk home, she said, "See, that's what I mean. Prescott started the same year as me, and he's already at that level." "Prescott is a freelance contractor," I said. "His earnings are irregular. He carries his own overhead, and he has no benefits or equity. High ceiling, no floor." She looked at me like I'd made a category error. That's such an engineer thing to say. Probably, I said. She didn't respond, but I felt her recalibrate. The walk finished in silence. That was when I began to run the numbers on us. Not financially, emotionally, structurally. The load-bearing elements of a relationship are trust, respect, and the quality of attention two people pay each other. I was paying close attention. What I was receiving in return, increasingly, was a version of me through her lens, a man who needed improvement. A project. I don't respond well to being someone's project. September into October, the pattern solidified. She used the word mediocre once, not directly applied to me. She was talking about ambition in general, some abstract quality she observed in men her age. There's just this mediocrity that sets in, she said. Like they hit 30 and decide comfortable is the same as successful. We were eating takeout at my apartment. I was reading project specs on my laptop. I closed the laptop, looked at her, said nothing, and looked back at my food. You know, I'm not talking about you specifically, she said. I know what you're doing, I said. She didn't ask me to clarify. That conversation lived in me for about 3 days, not as hurt, but as information. I'm neither delusional about my own shortcomings nor susceptible to someone else's version of them. Petra was applying pressure because she decided I wasn't enough, and rather than having the honest conversation a person of integrity would have, she was trying to reshape me through attrition. That's not a relationship. That's a renovation project. I had a conversation with myself that ran something like this. You could keep going and see if this resolves. Or you could recognize that someone who respects you doesn't need 14 months to figure that out. The data you have is sufficient. Make the call. I was almost at the call. I needed a clean moment, not a reactive one, not an emotional one. I don't end things in the middle of arguments. I end things when I'm clear. I was clear by the first week of October. I just hadn't found the moment yet. Let me tell you something about my family that explains why I hadn't mentioned certain things to Petra, or to most people I dated for that matter. My grandfather, Walter Calloway, built a manufacturing business in this region over 40 years. He wasn't a personality-driven man. He was systematic, patient, and almost allergically averse to ostentation. The company was called Calloway Industrial, pressure systems, valve components, infrastructure parts, and it was sold to a larger conglomerate when I was 19 for a number that I won't specify, but that was by any reasonable measure substantial. A portion of that sale was structured into a family trust. My grandfather designed it with his attorney with two explicit intentions: to prevent the kind of entitlement that eats its second-generation wealth, and to ensure distribution at an age when the recipient had already established something of their own. The terms of the trust were private. The distribution was scheduled for my 35th birthday, roughly 11 months away. I had known about this for years. It was not a secret from me. It was a secret from the world because that is how my grandfather had designed it, and I respected his reasoning completely. I had not told Petra. My reasoning was straightforward. I wanted to be known as I was, not as what I would inherit. I had built my professional life independently. The firm bore my name, but I had earned my seat in it. I chose my apartment, paid my bills, structured my savings. The trust was a future event, and I had no interest in letting its shadow fall backward over the present. The other reason, the quieter one, was this: anyone who would treat me differently because of money is precisely the kind of person I don't want in my life. I understood this as a theoretical principle. I was about to understand it as a lived one. The shift happened on a Thursday. I know it was a Thursday because I'd worked late. There was a structural review for a 6-story mixed-use building going up on Pelham Road, and I'd been at the drafting table until nearly 9. I came home to a voicemail from Petra. Her voice was different, warmer somehow, lighter. She said she'd been thinking about me, and wondered if I wanted to have dinner Friday. I replayed the message once, noted the tonal quality, and set my phone down. We'd spoken 2 days before, and the conversation had been cool. Not hostile, but with that particular flatness that precedes the end of things. She made another comment about a former colleague of hers who'd just launched his own consultancy, and I'd said, simply, good for him, and moved on. She'd gone quiet in that way. That meant she'd wanted a different reaction. So Thursday's voicemail was a departure. Not a large one, not dramatic, but a departure from the established pattern. I filed it. Friday dinner was at Austin, a Nordic-influenced restaurant in the Claridge district. Her suggestion, her reservation. I wore what I normally wear, dark trousers, a good shirt. I arrived exactly on time. She was already there, which was itself unusual. Petra operated on a small but consistent lateness that I'd long since stopped noting. She looked good. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a while, genuine seeming, unguarded. She touched my hand across the table early in the meal, which she hadn't done in months. I watched all of it with the calm attention of someone watching a building they know better than its architect. The dinner was pleasant in the surface-level sense. She asked about my projects with actual interest, or something that resembled it well enough to require closer inspection. She laughed more readily than usual. She mentioned, near the end of the second course, how much she'd always admired my discipline and focus. I thanked her. I did not flag the inconsistency out loud. I was still gathering. Walking out after dinner, she took my arm. On the street, she said, "I've been thinking. I haven't been fair to you lately." "How so?" I asked. Neutral. "I think I've been critical in ways I shouldn't have been. You've built something real. I've been comparing you to the wrong things." I looked at her. She met my eyes and held them. Her expression was composed, earnest, well executed. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. I walked her to her car. We said goodnight. I drove home with my mind turning quietly, the way it does when I know I'm looking at a structure that doesn't quite hold its own weight. I gave myself the weekend, not to feel my way through it emotionally. My feelings were already in order. I gave myself the weekend to verify what I suspected, because I operate better on confirmed information than on theory. The most likely explanation for Petra's shift was simple. She'd recalculated, decided she'd overplayed her hand, and was attempting to rebalance. People do this in relationships when they sense the other person pulling away. It can be genuine, a true reckoning, a real change. I didn't dismiss that possibility. I've done this work long enough to know that a single data point doesn't define a structure. But there was something in the texture of her shift that didn't match genuine recalibration. Genuine recalibration tends to be halting, a little awkward. It involves someone sitting with their own discomfort. What Petra had shown me across that dinner table was smooth. Practiced, like she'd worked out exactly what to say and had arranged herself accordingly. That's not remorse. That's strategy. The question was, what had changed in her information set? On Sunday afternoon, I called Cassidy Huang. Cassidy has been my friend since before Petra was anything to me, which meant my loyalty to that friendship ran deeper and in a different direction. She is perceptive, direct, and constitutionally incapable of withholding something she thinks you need to know. We'd had coffee 2 weeks earlier, and she'd seemed, very briefly, like she was weighing something. At the time, I hadn't pressed. "Reed," she said when she answered. "I was wondering if I'd hear from you." "Why's that?" I asked. A brief pause. I may have said something I probably shouldn't have. I kept my voice level. "To Petra." Another pause, shorter. "Yes. Tell me what you said." She told me. The account was complete and, to her credit, entirely honest. She and Petra had been at a mutual friend's brunch the previous Saturday, 10 days ago, 2 days before Petra's voicemail. The conversation had turned to family backgrounds, as conversations at brunches sometimes do, and Cassidy had mentioned, casually and without any sense of consequence, that my grandfather had built Callaway Industrial, that the company had sold for a considerable sum, and that there was a family trust involved. She hadn't disclosed numbers. She didn't know numbers. She knew what most people in Brennan Falls who'd grown up here could know, that the Callaway name was attached to a real industrial legacy and that the family hadn't walked away empty. "I didn't think it would matter," Cassidy said. "I'm sorry, Reed. I genuinely didn't think." "I know," I said. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong by sharing true information. You don't sound surprised." "I'm not," I said. "I'm grateful you told me." We talked for another few minutes about other things, and I could hear the relief in her voice that I wasn't angry. I wasn't. Cassidy hadn't armed someone with a weapon she'd constructed. She'd simply spoken a fact into the wrong room. When I hung up, I sat with it for a while. There it was. The architecture of Petra's shift fully revealed. Not a change of heart. Not a genuine reckoning. The moment she'd learned that I existed at a different financial altitude than she'd assumed, her entire calculus had reorganized. The mediocrity she'd been cataloging for months, the careful drip of comparisons designed to make me feel insufficient, all of it had been running on the assumption that I was exactly what I appeared to be, a working professional, competent, but not extraordinary in any material sense. New information had arrived. She had adjusted. The adjustment was, in its own way, more revealing than anything she'd said in 14 months. You can talk yourself into a lot of interpretations of someone's behavior, but behavior that changes precisely when the financial variable changes isn't ambiguous. It's a read. I'm an engineer. I understand load-bearing systems. The weight she'd placed on money had just told me everything I needed to know about what she'd been building with me. I spent Sunday evening and most of Monday morning deciding how to handle it. I don't air grievances. I don't prosecute cases. When I end something, I end it with precision and without performance. There would be no raised voices, no extended negotiation, no long conversation in which I walked her through my deductions so that she could walk me through her defenses. The only things that mattered were, she would know why, and she would know I knew. I messaged her Monday afternoon and asked if she was free that evening. I suggested a walk. The path along the Delvane River that runs through Carver Park was quiet at that hour, well lit, with enough ambient movement to keep things from becoming dramatic. I've found that breakups handled in motion, rather than seated across from each other in a restaurant or confined in someone's apartment, tend to be cleaner. There's somewhere to look. There's something to do with your body. She replied quickly, another data point, that she was free and that sounded nice. Sounds nice. A walk at 7 on a Monday. 14 months ago, she would have wanted the context. Now she wanted to say yes to whatever I proposed. I noted it, and I didn't say anything. We met at the Carver Park entrance at the east end of Delvane Road. She was in a light jacket against the October air, hair down, and she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt deliberate in its warmth. We started walking. The path follows the river for about a kilometer before it bends back through a grove of ash trees and returns to the entrance. It takes maybe 20 minutes at a comfortable pace. I knew I'd have what I needed said before we reached the trees. For the first few minutes, we talked about the surface of things. Her week at work, a project deadline I had coming, the temperature. She was at ease in a way that told me she thought this was a maintenance conversation, a nice evening in service of whatever she decided the two of us were in the process of rebuilding. I let the conversation settle. Then, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "What changed?" She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "You've spent several months telling me, in various ways, that I'm not achieving enough, that my work is too small scale, that I'm not enough of whatever metric you were using. And then about 10 days ago, something shifted. I want to understand what changed." Her pace slowed very slightly. I told you at dinner, I've been unfair. I had some time to reflect. What prompted the reflection? I asked, calm, genuinely curious in tone. I don't know that there was one specific thing. I nodded. We walked a few steps in silence. The river was low, the water dark, moving without sound. Cassidy told me about the conversation at brunch. I said. She didn't stop walking. To her credit, her stride didn't break. But something in the air between us changed the way atmosphere pressure changes before weather. What conversation? She said. She mentioned my family background, my grandfather's business, the trust. 3 seconds of silence. Maybe 4. Oh, Petra said. I'll let the silence work. I find that when a conversation reaches a point like this, when the person across from you has run out of road, silence is more effective than anything you could say next. People fill silence with what's true. That didn't have anything to do with it, she said. But it came out a half-beat too considered, the way a sentence sounds when someone has rehearsed a version of it. I turned to look at her. She met my eyes for a moment, then looked at the path ahead. I think it did, I said. I think it had everything to do with it. Another silence. The ash trees ahead were dark shapes in the evening light. Reed, you don't need to defend it, I said. I'm not angry. I'm not asking you to confess to something so I can hold it against you. I'm telling you what I observed because I think you deserve that. I haven't done anything wrong, she said, and there was a tightening in her voice now. Not guilt, I thought, but the particular defensiveness of someone who's been seen accurately and is not yet ready to sit with it. I didn't say you had, I said. What you did makes complete sense from the inside of your own logic. You want financial security. You want a partner who operates at a level that signals success to you in the ways you've defined success. I understand that. I don't think those are shameful things to want. She was quiet. But here's what I know, I continued. For months, the way you measured me was against what I appear to have. When the appearance changed, when you learned there might be more to the balance sheet than what you could see, you changed completely. Inside of 2 days, I went from someone you were nudging towards self-improvement to someone you found yourself newly admiring. I paused. The trees are close now. Your change of behavior the moment you learn about money tells me everything, I said. We're done. She stopped walking. I stopped beside her, not dramatically. I just matched her pace. Reed, she said. Her voice had changed register. Softer. I think you're misreading this. I don't, I said. Simply without heat. We built something over a year. You're willing to throw it away over. Over what? Over what I've observed and verified. Yes. I said it without unkindness. And I'm not throwing anything away. I'm setting something down that I've been holding longer than I should have. She looked at me, and I could see the moment where she decided to try a different approach. Her expression shifted, the defensive wall came down, and what replaced it was something intended to be vulnerable. I know I've been hard on you, she said. Her voice softened further. I've been scared. I push people away when I get too attached. I looked at her for a moment. It was a well-deployed move. I gave it real consideration. I hear what you're saying, I said, and maybe there's truth in it. But here's the problem. Petra, the fear you're describing would have resolved months ago if love was what was driving you. What resolved it was a conversation at a brunch table about money. She had nothing to put against that. I could see her working, searching, and coming up empty. I don't have bad feelings toward you, I said. I genuinely don't. I think you're looking for someone who can give you a specific kind of life, and that's not wrong to want. I'm just not the right mechanism for it, and I don't want to be anyone's mechanism. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked back along the path toward the park entrance at the same pace I'd come. She didn't follow. The days after that have their own particular quality, the kind I've come to recognize. The first morning when you wake up and the weight of a relationship's accumulated tension is gone, replaced by something lighter and quieter that takes a day or two to identify as relief. I worked. The Pelham Road project moved into its next phase. I had a good lunch with a structural contractor I'd been working with for 2 years, a man named Otto Farr, at a sandwich counter on Ashbrook Lane, where the food was unpretentious and the coffee was strong. I ran 3 mornings that week along the reservoir on the city's eastern edge. On Thursday, exactly a week after the first shifted voicemail, I had dinner with Cassidy at a small Japanese place on Cortlandt called Hazen, just the two of us, which we did every few months regardless of anything else. "I assume it's over," she said when we'd been seated. "Since Monday," I said. She looked at me carefully. "Are you all right?" "Better than I was 6 months ago," I said. 6 months ago, I was staying in something that didn't fit because I was giving it more time than it deserved. "Did you tell her why?" "Yes." "How did she take it?" "She tried a few different approaches," I said. "She didn't find one that worked." Cassidy turned her water glass. "I'm sorry, Reed, for my part in it. Your part in it was speaking honestly about a true thing. That's not something you should apologize for." I meant it. If anything, it accelerated a conclusion I'd already reached. "Consider yourself a catalyst." She laughed at that, and I did too, and we ordered and talked about other things. She mentioned that she was considering a position at a competing firm, something I thought she should take if the terms were right. She told me about a weekend trip she was planning to the Olcott Valley, ironically the same region Petra and I had visited. I told her the vineyard at the north end of the valley, a small operation called Marin Estate, had the better wine even though the tasting room was harder to find. There's a specific kind of contentment in a friendship that's survived something and come out intact. I felt it across that table, warm and uncomplicated. Walking home afterward, I thought about my grandfather. Walter Calloway had never been sentimental about money, but he'd been careful with it in a way that read as deeply moral. Careful not to let it inflate egos or damage relationships or substitute for the actual substance of a life. He'd been married to my grandmother for 51 years. He'd once told me, when I was maybe 22, that the quality of a person reveals itself most clearly at the intersection of money and character. Watch what people do when they believe resources are available or unavailable, he'd said. That's where you see who they actually are. I'd filed that away the way you file away advice from someone you trust, but haven't yet had to apply. It had taken me until October at 34, walking the Delvane River path with a woman who'd recalibrated toward me the moment my asset base was redefined to understand it completely. He'd been exactly right. 3 weeks later, I was at a small dinner hosted by Otto Farr and his wife, B, at their house in the Linden Heights district. 8 people, a long table, the kind of evening that runs easy from drinks to food to conversation without effort. I knew most of the guests. One I didn't, a woman named Solve, who was an urban planner for the city, working on transit infrastructure, and who spoke about load distribution and structural tolerance with an accuracy that made me slightly suspicious she'd done research before the dinner. She hadn't. She just knew her field. We talked from appetizers through to dessert, running parallel, and then converging, and then diverging again, the way conversations go when 2 people are actually interested in what the other is saying. She had an unsettling way of identifying exactly what was interesting about a problem before she solved it, the kind of mind that finds the load-bearing point first. I found this, if I'm being honest, somewhat disarming. When the group moved from the dinner table to Otto and BEA's sitting room, Solve and I found ourselves by the window that looked out over the Linden Heights rooftops, the city lit quiet below the October dark. "You designed the Carver Park footbridge," she said. It wasn't a question. "I did," I said. "The torsion solution on the south anchor is unusual. I've looked at it a few times. It's a cleaner load path than the conventional approach for that span width," I said. "Conventional would have added mass you don't need." "I know," she said. "That's why I found it interesting." I looked at her for a moment. She looked back, waiting for what I'd say next, with the particular quality of attention that belongs to people who are actually listening. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure, she said. What are you working on? She told me about the transit corridor, a new line cutting diagonally across the city's northwest quadrant, with 3 elevated sections that each presented their own structural challenges. She had concerns about one of the elevation transitions, a point where the grade changed in a way that would create differential settlement in the foundation over time. She described it precisely and without hedging. That's solvable, I said. It would take about 3 different approaches to price out properly, but the transition geometry can be managed. I know it's solvable, she said. I'm trying to figure out who I trust to solve it. I smiled. She smiled back. Outside, the city was doing what cities do at night, going on uninterrupted, indifferent to whatever we decided. I didn't need to rush anything. The work was what it was. The evening was what it was. I was exactly who I'd been when I walked in. That, more than anything, felt like the right place to be. My 35th birthday is 11 months away. I think about it occasionally, not with anticipation exactly, but with a kind of preparedness. My grandfather built something real, and he took care with who inherited it, and now I'll inherit it in the way he intended, having already built something real of my own. I'll deal with it the way I deal with most things, carefully, without performance, and with clear eyes about who belongs in that story. Petra will not be part of it. The woman by the window at Otto's dinner party, I don't know yet. But I noticed that she never asked what my family name was attached to, never asked about the firm's reach, never asked where projects like the footbridge typically build. She asked about the torsion solution. She asked why I'd made the choices I'd made. That tells me something. In structures, as in most things, what you build on determines what holds. My grandfather knew that. I've spent 34 years learning it in my own way, and I expect I'll spend the next 34 learning it further. The city smells like wood smoke and cold water. The work is good. I'm still standing. That's more than enough.
Thanks for listening.